This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Hello and welcome to HealthLink, a program connecting home, community, and healthcare. My name is Carol Merton, and I am delighted to welcome today two guests who are from the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay. So in no particular order, Marilyn Struthers is joining us. Marilyn is a meeting facilitator, project development coach, and organizational support for community organizations, and she is a member and facilitator within the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay. And alongside Marilyn, we also have Rosalyn Morrison. And among her many, many talents, Roz is also the board chair for the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay. Today, we're here to learn more about what the Institute is, and also especially to hear more information about their affordable housing toolkit, which is hot off the press and on their website, and also social finance tools. I have had the pleasure over the last year and a half, approximately, to have participated and learned within the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay. It's been a wonderful opportunity for me to network and to get perspectives that in other forums I may not have had the chance. So I want to say thank you to both of my speakers today, but also to the Institute for helping me learn and to help me on the journey of understanding about affordable housing and social finance tools. So welcome to both of you. I am delighted that you're here. And I know we've got slides and I know we've got lots of topic material. So I'm just going to start right away. And I think the first question goes to Roz, and that is, what exactly is the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay?
Thanks, Carol. Well, the Institute is a young organization. It's volunteer-driven. And it was founded based on the belief that if we harnessed all the people in our region, we could do amazing things together. So we do three things, really. We connect people. So, Carol, your point about networking and meeting people that we can learn from each other is an important function of the Institute. The second thing we do is we share knowledge. Whether we're involved in the research ourselves and sharing it through our website, or learning from other jurisdictions about what's happening in terms of new ideas to deal with pressing issues, or what exciting opportunities are happening. We have the belief that we look at three things in terms of prosperity. One is social prosperity. Second one is environmental prosperity. And the third one is economic prosperity. When you bring those things together, then you have a wonderful, integrated, holistic way of looking at our communities.
Excellent, excellent. So as we flow through this conversation, I'm not going to name your name specifically, but feel free to pop in back and forth and pass the questions to each other. But I think certainly for my knowledge base, I really would like to know how the Institute decides on things to investigate and explore, and especially how it got involved in the affordable housing issue.
Well, maybe I'll take that, Marilyn, and I'll pass the baton to you in a minute. But the connection that we talked about and the sharing knowledge that we talked about, we hope leads to collaborative projects. And that's really what we've come to understand, is that no one sector, no one town can deal with the complexity of what we're facing in the 21st century. So we hold community conversations to find out what people are concerned about, what the pressing issues are from their perspective. And we actually dialogue and learn about what we need to be thinking about and where we focus our time and energies and resources. So through those community conversations, especially during the pandemic, we focused on four main areas. First one, we were looking at local sustainable economies. So back to that triple bottom line of prosperity, how can we strengthen our local economies and how can we make them sustainable? So one area that we're exploring is, what is the next economy? What is a green economy? The second area of interest is regional arts network. How can we network all the artists and arts organizations across our region so that they become stronger and can do things they couldn't do on their own? Certainly through the pandemic, we all leaned a lot on the arts. We watched a lot of Netflix. So people who don't really believe they might be an arts supporter really are. And we've come to understand the value of the arts. The third piece is this big one we're discussing today, social finance and housing. We could see the increasing problems with affordable housing and the lack thereof through a lot of change during the pandemic, which Marilyn will tell you about, and the access to capital and how are we going to get access to capital to develop and build and manage the kind of housing that we need. And then the fourth is all about business and innovation. So a lot of the pandemic economic recovery plans were focused on traditional businesses, which is good. But what we learned through the pandemic is that we actually need to do things differently. So what would it look like if our business sector had a triple bottom line? So those are the four main areas that we're focused on.
Excellent. Marilyn, what can you add?
Oh, you know, Carol, I've been organizing in our communities for a really long time. And I've also had the opportunity to work a lot provincially and nationally with the social innovation world and the social finance world. And somewhere after meeting Roz came the invitation to take part in one of those wonderful discussions, community discussions but to talk about social finance and what that is. Because we realized that really that was unfamiliar language here. And as a result, some of the tools that we might be using to build community wealth, community sustainability are not really available. So I did that. And then I realized the language really was Greek. So I wrote a social finance primer, which you can now find, I think, in its third iteration, because the stuff changes all the time, up on our toolkit, which we'll talk about. And in the process, Ross said, how do we approach this as a community? Like, is it another event or what is it? And we landed on the idea of a learning community. And so we really just let it be known that we were going to be thinking about social finance through the pandemic, and we linked it to pandemic recovery. And we met every 2 weeks. Carol, I think you were probably part of it there at the beginning. And I don't know for how long, but I remember saying, oh gosh, it's spring, we're going to take the summer off, right? I've been facilitating and organizing meetings for a while. And people said, no, Marilyn, we're on the edge of the housing crisis. We have to see how this stuff works in real life. Yeah. And so that led us to some wonderful adventures, including being part of the social finance and innovation approach to affordable housing, a social innovation lab that was convened by CMHC and Social Innovation Canada. And so the toolkit is our project from that, watching how other communities were managing to think about community wealth and social finance instruments that have social impact.
Yeah, I know. I remember us not wanting to take the summer off, and I'm not sure if that surprised you, but there was quite a lot of energy around this topic. Without a doubt, it was remarkable, actually, that people said, "No, we don't want the summer off. We're going to go forward." So I know we're going to be drilling down a little bit more, of course, into the toolkit, and that's important information. But you talk about community wealth. What do you mean by community wealth?
Well, the community wealth movement is something people can Google now and learn more about. And it's gaining some ground in Europe, in the UK particularly, and in the US. And I think we're on the edge of this in Canada. And the affordable housing question really opens the idea that our communities are really dependent, not just on the wealthy for community wealth, but actually the wealth of the community depends on everyone doing well. So some of what we'll talk about in a bit is what happens when, for example, people who are the backbone of a lot of the businesses in our community earning, between $15 and $25 an hour, what happens if they actually can't afford housing? And that matters every bit as much as, when the housing market goes up and people are, suddenly finding their houses have doubled in value. So all of that is community wealth. And I think the most important thing to think about from the financial end of community wealth, Roz mentioned there's also a social end. How do we get along? How do we help each other? Is there fitness classes? Are there places for kids? And, all of that sort of stuff. But the really important thing is that this is under the control of individual communities. And our municipalities actually have a finger on the largest portion of community wealth in rural. They own or manage or work in some ways with the largest portion of what we hold in the commons. So the community wealth strategies look at how do we mobilize what we own in the commons to the benefit and the sustainability of a community.
And the term that I learned was leveraging assets, and which sounds like a big phrase, but what you're describing is how to leverage the assets of a municipality to help for all.
Yeah. So I'll just say a bit more about that, because that was a major learning moment for me, actually, listening to some folks in Toronto who were talking about how they leverage nonprofit sector assets. And of course, they have much bigger nonprofit sector asset pool than we do in our communities, but we do have some. And when I started to think about that and housing, I realized that's exactly what developers are doing. They're coming into our communities. They are leveraging their assets. They are leveraging investments that, ordinary people create within their communities to build wealth. And that's all well and fine for the developer's wealth. But when we begin to hit up against a wall on sustainability in our communities, we should maybe be looking at how we leverage our own wealth to the benefit of the community and community members.
Can I just for a minute and add to that, Carol? Marilyn has, as part of the facilitation that she does with the group, has introduced some ideas to us that talk about community wealth, the municipal taxes that everyone pays, and intentionally thinking about that triple bottom line. So municipalities purchase a lot of services and goods. And if it was intentional that they purchase 10 or 15% locally, you can see that if we combined all the municipalities' budgets over Southern Georgian Bay, that would be a significant boost to our local economy. And that's another example of community wealth. It's called social procurement.
There's actually a wonderful organization called Buy Social Canada, which people can look at, and it consults with municipalities on how to do a better job on this piece.
So, Roz, I know that you and Marilyn both together have done a recent interview, and Marilyn, you've done a conversation at the Rural Ontario Municipal Association as well. I'm wondering if both of you, before we get into the real meat of the housing affordability issue, if you want to just briefly talk about, how you've been starting to spread the message, and you have intention to spread the message even further. So who would like to take that one?
Well, I'll start if you like. It was quite an experience for me to be invited to a panel at Roma. And what was fun is I've never been to a Roma conference, but I understand they're not always the most exciting events. But we actually had a standing ovation because housing matters so much. It matters so much in rural, and our situation is different than urban. We know that, right? Yeah. So the Explore that focused on everything from homelessness to what happens when a PSW can't find a place to live. And, you are a retirement community. Yeah. Ross, we've done a fair number of interviews in the last while.
We have, and I think it's because everybody knows that they are experiencing some kind of impact from the lack of affordable housing. And so that's new. That's new for a lot of people, not for everybody, but it's new for a lot of people. And that's when you know you've got a good intervention point. And so one of our biggest challenges is to get all of us, like all of the communities, on the same page. And that is on the same page of understanding what is affordable housing. There is a national definition that Marilyn reminds us of that is simply 30% of gross pre-tax household income. And so that 30% allows other funds to be used for all the other things that we need for a healthy life. So getting everyone on the same page with understanding that definition alone, which sounds simple, but it's taking a lot of work. And so that's the first thing we begin with. But we do need to get all of us on the same page because it's an all hands on deck crisis. Mm-hmm. And we will all need to make this better. And so that's part of the discussion. It's, well, what could each of us do?
Yeah. So if you're both comfortable with moving on to the housing affordability and the toolkit, and particularly, Marilyn, you mentioned about PSWs, and the focus of our conversation today is to move us not specifically around homelessness, but about, because that we all know how critically important that is, but to add the additional component about housing for community sustainability and survival. So I'm wondering, Marilyn, if you'd like to take us along the housing affordability issue and what it really looks like for people who are PSWs, retail workers, industry workers.
Sure. We were introduced to the social development goals at one point in our journey, and SDG 11 is quite a wonderful set of 9 different elements of that ensure the sustainability of a community. And, our community, I remember the farm crisis well. We have seen before what happens when one part of our community goes down hard, and how that affects in sustainability of the community for everyone. So somehow that's looming in the back of my mind, those tractorcades in Owen Sound. Mm-hmm. So we started to take a broader economic look. If folks are living in tents on the river, you really notice that. But maybe we don't notice the ways in which other members of our community, and eventually all of us, are actually touched by what's happening here. So we went onto because this project spans a number of communities. I'm just going to speak about Owen Sound right now. We went onto the website of Owen Sound, but we've done this with our other communities as well, to ask, what kind of workers are our key industries relying on? And so in Owen Sound, there is a list of 4. There's healthcare workers, there's retail folks, hospitality and tourism, and a little bit of manufacturing. So if you look just for fun at healthcare, obviously you've got docs, at the higher end specialists, but really that system, particularly for elder care, which is a big deal in our community, relies on PSWs. And so we, in the absence of any planning from our municipalities on how much affordability, at what salary level are we looking at 30%, we started to take some particular profiles, and PSWs this piece was done for us by Erin Devaney, who's a volunteer with some pretty good data skill. And so what she did is she investigated the rental rates in Owen Sound right now for a 1-bedroom apartment, and she looked at what 30% of income would be. And what she found there was that pretty much now 55% of households in Owen Sound would be unable to afford a 1-bedroom apartment.
Wow.
pretty rocky when you think about sustainability. Now, what's key here is to know that, first of all, that is the only Canadian definition of affordability. So if you spend 30% on your housing costs, perhaps that's your heat, your hydro. We know all about the United Way's assistance with energy costs during the winter. So that 30%, it should leave the other 60 for things like your income tax, your transportation, your food, your clothing, your childcare, all of that. And that this really comes into play if you have to face a change. So with a senior, for example, a partner dies, then maybe it's not so possible to stay in the family home. And now you begin to look for rental, right? It's a pretty common trajectory. For a woman in a family, maybe things aren't going so well and she needs to leave her partner. She's now looking at considerably higher rates to rent even a similar apartment to what she may have had before because of this huge increase. So someone coming to Old Sound to take up a job as a PSW, let's have a look at how they would fare. So what Erin did, and this is really on the next slide, is look at what minimum wage offers. So we're looking at $7.75 would be the 30% for that single income household, which pretty much isn't available in Owen Sound right now. My last look was something like $1,700 a month for a single bedroom. So a PSW is this slide actually doesn't deal with the PSWs, it's everything else, but the PSW is going to be making a little bit more than minimum wage. I think they're in at $21 an hour now. So $5 more. So Erin did a scan and found that there's not actually a single apartment, one bedroom in Owen Sound that could be held for what 30% of that $21 would be. So what that means is that we have a workforce that our community really depends on that can't find housing. And that's just not making anyone sustainable at this point.
Yeah,
it's not.
That's a big concern. Roz, were you going to say something?
Yeah, it's not just personal support workers, the PSWs. It's practical nurses. It's all the people who run the hospital that you don't necessarily see. And so we thought that this focus on health and well-being would really help all of us sort of listen, learn together, and say, yeah, well, we can all do something. So how do we get involved?
And this example makes it real. It makes it absolutely real. When you hear words about affordable and attainable, which some people try to mix together, which just confuses everything. But this example makes it real. And I think it's a serious situation. So what did the Institute do with this information?
So that's when we started to talk about how can we actually link real-time data connected to real-time industries to planning for affordability. And Carol, you've asked me the question a number of times, how many affordable units do we need and affordable at what level? Yeah. And, municipalities haven't had a traditional role planning for that kind of housing, but I think we need to now. We need to have that kind of an analysis. And if we can do it as the Institute, using volunteers, then I'm pretty sure we can go a whole lot farther with municipalities on board looking. The problem with the attainability definition is it's based on market rate, the housing for purchase, right? But most of our employees, or a good sizable number of our employees, are not even close to the housing purchase market.
Yeah.
And we need to look at affordability based on their income.
Yeah. So I know we've got about 4 more minutes in the program. So I know for sure we want to talk about the action plan and also what can the community do? So where would you like to take us next?
Let me run a quick rundown of what we'd like municipalities to be paying more attention to. We're starting to do a series of deputations, share the knowledge kind of stuff. We really want municipalities to be looking at some of these mechanisms like land trusts, community bonds, things like that. And we want them to take up a planning role using the resources that they already have to really develop a profile of what we need and then engage with the community on what are the multiple kinds of possibilities that we could come up with if we think in collaboration.
Yeah. And for anyone who hasn't had the advantage of seeing the toolkit, one of the calls to action you put on the information you gave me was go in and look at the toolkit. There's a website, right? What other calls to action would you encourage people to do? Oh,
you're on mute, Ross.
I think you're on mute.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in on that learning piece because there's a lot in the toolkit because it's a complex issue. So I would recommend that you take a piece at a time and really deeply understand what our own role could be and involvement. So another big piece on the call to action is that all of us as residents can encourage our municipalities to have some kind of committee, working group, table, looking at and learning together about affordable housing. And then if that happened across the region, then wouldn't it be amazing to accelerate progress by bringing representatives from those tables together so that we could have a regional discussion group and action group to utilize some of the tools that Marilyn had talked about that could help accelerate access to capital. Because one of the points that we've learned through this is that even building these days the building costs these days will never sort of come out at the affordability that's required for a lot of our labor force. So we need to use these new social finance tools to be able to help leverage or increase access to capital or bring down the unit price point as an end game.
Yeah, so there are things that we can do individually and we can do collectively as a community. Our time is almost up, and I appreciate very much you coming and speaking to us about this, and I want to invite you back. As we move through this process, please consider this a standing invitation to appear again on the program and update us on more things that we can do to address the housing affordability issue in our communities. Thank you both. Thank you as well to our viewing audience for joining us today to learn more about programs, resources, and services available to you and to your family. Take care and stay safe. Thank you.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
When an impaired driver killed my brother DJ, my life changed forever. During the pandemic, all of our lives changed, and many of us turned to alcohol and drugs to cope. As life returns to normal, the increase in substance